Hello, I'm Garry Stevens, and welcome to the History in the Bible podcast. All the history, in all the books, in all the Bibles. Episode 1.47 Calamities of the Two Kingdoms. In the last episode of the History in the Bible, we finished with Jehu's successful coup against both Hebrew kings in 840 or 839 BC. The new king had little time to enjoy his new position. In one of the last monuments erected during his long rule, the Assyrian king Shalmaneser III created a handsome 2-metre high black limestone obelisk to record his last campaign in the Levant in 838 BC. That was the second or third year of Jehu's reign. This obelisk contains the earliest known depiction of an Israelite. It is not flattering. In exquisite detail, the cartoon strip images show Jehu grovelling at the great king's feet. The inscription says, quote, "The tribute of Jehu, son of Omri. I received from him silver, gold, a golden bowl, a golden vase with pointed bottom, golden tumblers, golden buckets, tin, a staff for a king, and spears." End quote. Not a great start to a reign. Shalmaneser III was the last Assyrian king to vex the Levant for decades. For the next 30 years, the Assyrians were preoccupied with a bigger menace in the form of the kingdom of Urartu to their north. You might think that was good news for Jehu's kingdom. No. Between Israel and Assyria lay the rich and populous state of Aram-Damascus. With no Assyrians to trouble him, the Aramaean king Hazael moved quickly to cow his puny neighbours. The Assyrians called King Hazael the son of a nobody, an expression often used to refer to a hostile monarch who was not the son of his royal predecessor. Hazael conquered much of Israel east of the Jordan, the traditional territories of the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh. The result was misery. Long quote. 2 Kings 6:24. The king of Aram mustered his entire army and marched upon Samaria and besieged it. There was a great famine in Samaria, and the siege continued until a donkey's head sold for 80 shekels of silver. Once, when Jehu was walking on the city wall, a woman cried out to him, "Help me, your majesty." "Don't ask me," he replied. "Let the Lord help you. Where could I get help for you?" "But, well, what troubles you?" the king asked her. The woman answered, "That woman said to me, 'Give up your son, and we shall eat him today. And tomorrow we'll eat my son.' So we cooked my son, and we ate him. The next day I said to her, 'Give up your son, and let's eat him.' But she hid her son. When the king heard what the woman said, he rent his clothes. And as he walked along the wall, the people could see that he was wearing sackcloth underneath." End quote. The Assyrian king had only laid his foot on Jehu's neck and demanded tribute. The Aramaeans, though, had devastated his kingdom. It says something when the Assyrians are only your second worst problem. Hazael also has his own version of the events surrounding Jehu's coup. Hazael erected what we now call the Tel Dan stele. This was discovered in the 1990s. It is a triumphal inscription in Aramaic, celebrating a victory over the Hebrews. Only 13 lines have been preserved, and even those are broken. But we can be certain that those fragments record the first clear reference to the house of David found outside the Bible. A reasonable interpretation of other lines attributes the deaths of Jehoram and Ahaziah to Hazael of Aram-Damascus, not Jehu. Another question we will probably never resolve. The Bible doesn't say much about the rest of Jehu's reign, save that it lasted for 27 years, ending when Jehu died of natural causes. Modern scholars tend to lop a decade off that reign to better fit the synchronisms. The house of Jehu would rule for a century. Its first two rulers would exert little influence outside their capital city of Samaria. No wonder the Bible devotes half as much space to Jehu's house as it does to the house of Omri, although Jehu's family ruled for twice as long. Jehu was followed on the throne of Israel by his teenage son Jehoahaz in 821 BC. The Book of Kings has only 8 verses which paint a dismal picture. Quote, 2 Kings 13:2. He did what was displeasing to Yahweh. He persisted in the sins which Jeroboam had caused Israel to commit. He did not depart from them. Yahweh was angry with Israel, and he repeatedly delivered them into the hands of King Hazael of Aram, and into the hands of Ben-Hadad, son of Hazael. But Jehoahaz pleaded with Yahweh. So Yahweh granted Israel a deliverer, and they gained their freedom from Aram, and Israel dwelt in its homes as before. However, they did not depart from the sins which the house of Jeroboam had caused Israel to commit. They persisted in them. Even the sacred post stood in Samaria. In fact, Jehoahaz was left with a force of only 50 horsemen, 10 chariots, and 10,000 foot soldiers. For the king of Aram had decimated them and trampled them like the dust under his feet. End quote. That verse about some unknown deliverer seems to have been put there just to make us feel less miserable for the poor king. And those 10 chariots are a far cry from the 2,000 that Ahab was able to field 30 years earlier. After 17 dismal years, Jehoahaz was followed by his son Jehoash, Jehoash, in 804 BC. With Joash, Jehu's dynasty finally got a break. His coming good fortune was predicted by the aged Elisha. Quote, 2 Kings 13:14. Elisha had been stricken with the illness of which he was to die, and King Joash of Israel went down to see him. He wept over him and cried, Father, Father, Israel's chariots and horsemen. Elisha said to him, Get a bow and arrows. And he brought him a bow and arrows. Then he said to the king of Israel, Open the window toward the east. And he opened it. Elisha said, Shoot, and he shot. Then he said, An arrow of victory for the Lord, an arrow of victory over Aram. You shall rout Aram completely at Aphek. End quote. After he passes away, Elisha has one more miracle to work. Quote, 2 Kings 13:20. So Elisha died, and they buried him. Now bands of Moabites used to invade the land in the spring of the year. As a man was being buried, a marauding band was seen, and the man was thrown into the grave of Elisha. As soon as the man touched the bones of Elisha, he came to life and stood on his feet. End quote. Joash triumphs over the Arameans, vindicating the prophet's prediction. The Bible doesn't mention that Joash had a little help from the Assyrians under King Adad-Nirari III. He was the first Assyrian king to return to the Levant in 30 years. While Joash feebly stuck pins into the Arameans from the west, the Assyrians were assaulting them with hammers from the north. Aram-Damascus put up a good fight, but without the alliance of neighbours that had been forged in Ahab's time, it was doomed to failure. The Arameans were forced to pay heavy tribute, but were allowed to survive. Assyrian records show that Joash also paid tribute, no doubt in gratitude for Israel's liberation. Freed from defending himself against Aram-Damascus, Joash was more than capable of resisting an ill-timed invasion by Amaziah of Judah. I'll get to that story soon. Joash died in his bed in 789 BC after a reign of 16 years. Joash was followed by his son Jeroboam II in 788 BC. He ruled for 41 years, by far the longest reign of any northern king. The archaeological evidence is that this was a prosperous time. Olive oil production expanded. The full complement of statehood emerged. Literacy, bureaucratic administration, specialised economic production, and a professional army. Jeroboam II was on a roll. Like his father Joash, Jeroboam was more than helped by the Assyrians. They came back to whack the Arameans for a second time, defeating King Hadrianu of Aram-Damascus early in Jeroboam's reign. The Book of Kings grudgingly reports that Jeroboam recovered territories previously lost to Aram-Damascus. He recovered the territory of the tribe of Dan at the very north of the kingdom, and lands east of the Jordan. Kings claims he even took Damascus itself and other cities in Syria. The Book of Kings is never happy recording an Israelite achievement. It attributes Jeroboam's success to God's good graces. Jeroboam II is the last king of Israel to be described as accomplishing mighty deeds. After Jeroboam, Israel would go to pot. Not literally. The final years of his reign were not so happy. Assyria withdrew from the Levant, preoccupied with yet another round of civil war and revolt. Israel's neighbours breathed a vast collective sigh of relief and returned to their favourite hobby, bashing the Hebrews. It's time to get back to the kingdom of Judah. So, let's flip back to Judah, 90 years earlier. When we left Judah, 90 years before the death of Jeroboam II, Jehu of Israel had killed Judah's king Ahaziah. The Bible recounts just two events about the next monarch, her accession and her fall. Quote, 2 Kings 11:1. When Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, learned that her son was dead, she promptly killed off all who were of royal stock. End quote. Everything about this is strange. Athaliah was the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel of Israel, given in marriage to Jehoram of Judah, Ahaziah's father. I'm sticking with the one Jehoram theory that I discussed in the last episode. That simply seems to make the most sense. We know that the most important woman in Judah was the king's mother, the great lady. The Book of Kings always makes a point of mentioning the great lady's name. Still, that a woman was able to take control is remarkable. Athaliah stands as the single queen regnant in the history of the two kingdoms. No other woman would rule a Hebrew state for another 700 years. How on earth did the Israelite Athaliah become a queen of Judah after the death of her son? Perhaps her dowry included a hefty military contingent of Israelites. Even a middling professional bodyguard would have overawed the militia of the tiny rural kingdom of Judah. But why did Athaliah kill off all who were of royal stock? Surely her son's children were her justification for taking power, at least as regent, and they were her best insurance for keeping it. None of this makes sense. After a 6-year reign, Athaliah was destroyed in a classic folktale plot, led by the sister of her son Ahaziah. I use that expression deliberately, sister of her son. Given the endemic polygamy of Judean kings, it is not at all clear if this woman was Athaliah's daughter or stepdaughter. Long quote. 2 Kings 11:2. The sister of Ahaziah secretly took Ahaziah's son Joash away from among the princes who were being slain. And they kept him hidden from Athaliah so that he was not put to death. He stayed with her for 6 years, hidden in the house of Yahweh, while Athaliah reigned over the land. In the 7th year, the high priest Jehoiada sent for the chiefs of the hundreds of the Carites and of the guards. He made a pact with them, exacting an oath from them in the house of Yahweh, and he showed them the king's son. The chiefs of hundreds did just as Jehoiada ordered. Jehoiada then brought out the king's son, and placed upon him the crown and the insignia. They anointed him and proclaimed him king. They clapped their hands and shouted, "Long live the king!" When Athaliah heard the shouting of the guards and the people, she came out to the people in the house of Yahweh. She looked about and saw the king standing by the pillar, the chiefs with their trumpets beside the king, and all the people of the land rejoicing and blowing trumpets. Athaliah rent her garments and cried out, "Treason! Treason!" The soldiers cleared a passageway for her, and she entered the royal palace through the horses' entrance. There she was put to death. End quote. Joash, also called Jehoash, ascended the throne of Judah in 832 BC, at the tender age of 7. He would reign for 30 years. The book of Kings describes his ascension as very much a palace coup. In Chronicles, it is a national movement and mass uprising, reminiscent of David's accession. To me, this sounds like a coup launched by the priestly establishment, who bitterly opposed the religious pluralism of the cursed Israelite Athaliah. That she was also a mere woman must have left them in anguished paroxysms. The priests found a pliant child they could plausibly claim as the true heir of David's line, and managed to plop him on the throne. They now had a king friendly to their God Yahweh, but they wanted more. They wanted money. Jehoash gave it to them in plenty. Quote, 2 Kings 12:5. Jehoash said to the priests, "All the money, current money, brought into the house of the Lord as sacred donations, any money a man may pay as the money equivalent of persons, or any other money that a man may be minded to bring to the house of the Lord, let the priests receive it, each from his benefactor. They, in turn, shall make repairs on the house wherever damage may be found." End quote. Let's fast forward 23 years. Jehoash is now a mature 30 years of age. Quote, 2 Kings 12:7. But in the 23rd year of King Joash, it was found that the priests had not made the repairs on the house. So King Joash summoned the priest Jehoiada and the other priests and said to them, "Why have you not kept the house in repair? Now do not accept money from your benefactors any more, but have it donated for the repair of the house." The priests agreed that they would neither accept money from the people nor make repairs on the house. End quote. 23 years of donations for sacred building works have been embezzled. The Judean priests had created the world's first skimming fraud. When confronted with their larceny, Jehoiada and the priests shrug their shoulders and say nothing. Jehoash directs that the workmen get their wages directly, bypassing the sticky fingers of God's priests. God had a more benign view of the priestly malfeasance. He sent the armies of Aram-Damascus to punish the king for his good governance. If the priests could not have the gold, neither could King Jehoash. Quote, 2 Kings 12:18. At that time, King Hazael of Aram came up and attacked Gath and captured it. And Hazael proceeded to march on Jerusalem. Thereupon King Joash of Judah took all the objects that had been consecrated by his fathers, Kings Jehoshaphat, Jehoram, and Ahaziah of Judah, and by himself, and all the gold that there was in the treasuries of the temple of Yahweh and in the royal palace. And he sent them to King Hazael of Aram, who then turned back from his march on Jerusalem." End quote. All that effort repairing the temple, only to see it fall into the hands of Aram. This is the third time that the temple is pillaged, once by a rampaging Pharaoh Sheshonk a century before, now twice by the Arameans demanding tribute. According to Chronicles, but not Kings, the priests and Jehoash enjoyed a wonderful relationship, not a hint of larceny. Quite the opposite. In the account of the chronicler, Joash turned bad after the death of his patron Jehoiada. The Book of Kings has no brief for the priesthood. The chronicler loves priests and is keen to protect their reputation. Both Kings and Chronicles relate that Jehoash was murdered in a palace coup. The infant Jehoash had been placed on the throne by the priests and the royal bodyguard. One interpretation of his downfall is that the priesthood lost control of the young king after the priest Jehoiada's death. Perhaps the inner circles knew all along that he was an impostor and allowed him to reign as long as he poured money into the priestly coffers. Whatever the situation, Jehoash was succeeded by his 25-year-old son Amaziah in 802 BC. That would mean Amaziah was born when his father was 12 years old. Okay. In a cryptic clue, the Book of Kings records that Amaziah took revenge on his father's regicides only after the regal power was firmly in his hands. The Book of Kings approves of Amaziah's clemency in refusing to kill all the children of the conspirators. Amaziah was a contemporary of King Jehoash of Israel, who bore the same name as Amaziah's own father. I know, the names are confusing, but what can I do? Check out the timelines at my website, www.historyinthebible.com. At Amaziah's accession, the kingdom of Aram-Damascus was reeling from Assyrian assaults. Amaziah exploited their weakness by invading Edom, southernmost of Judah's neighbours. He wanted to secure his trade routes to Arabia. His campaign was a bloody success, but followed by a theological blunder. The chronicler fits the gaff into his usual pattern of describing a king as successful in his early years when he follows God, and a failure in his later years when he strays. Quote, 2 Chronicles 25:14. When Amaziah returned from slaughtering the Edomites, he brought back the gods of the people of Seir. He set them up as his own gods, bowed down to them, and burnt sacrifices to them. The anger of the Lord burned against Amaziah, and he sent a prophet to him who said, "Why do you consult this people's gods, which could not save their own people from your hand?" While he was still speaking, the king said to him, "Have we appointed you an adviser to the king? Stop." So the prophet stopped, but said, "I know that God has determined to destroy you, because you have done this and have not listened to my counsel." End quote. That a Judean king should worship foreign gods was unprecedented. Israel's kings, of course, but Judah's? Naturally, there would be retribution. Fresh from his triumph against Edom, Amaziah challenged King Jehoash of Israel. Quote, 2 Chronicles 25:17. Then King Amaziah of Judah took counsel and sent this message to Joash, king of Israel. "Come, let us confront each other." King Joash of Israel sent back this message to King Amaziah of Judah. The thistle in Lebanon sent this message to the cedar in Lebanon. "Give your daughter to my son in marriage." But a wild beast in Lebanon passed by and trampled the thistle. You boast that you have defeated the Edomites, and you are ambitious to get more glory. Now, stay at home. lest provoking disaster you fall, dragging Judah down with you." End quote. Israel was more populous, more wealthy, and more powerful than Amaziah's Judah. But Amaziah pressed the matter. Quote, 2 Chronicles 25:20. "But Amaziah paid no heed. It was God's doing in order to deliver them up, because they worshipped the gods of Edom. King Joash of Israel marched up, and he and King Amaziah of Judah confronted each other. The men of Judah were routed by Israel, and they all fled to their homes. King Joash of Israel captured Amaziah. He brought him to Jerusalem and made a breach of 400 cubits in the wall of Jerusalem. Then, with all the gold and silver, and all the utensils that were to be found in the house of God, and with the treasuries of the royal palace, and with the hostages, he returned to Israel." End quote. The king of Judah was not only crushed, but taken captive to Israel. He had reigned for 16 years. Judah was looted for a fourth time. The realm was reduced to a miserable tributary of the northern kingdom. What happened after that is unclear. The book of Kings assigns to Amaziah a further 13 years, outliving his Israelite conqueror Joash. That would place his death in 786 BC. The Bible has a terse and cryptic description. Quote, 2 Kings 14:19. "A conspiracy was formed against him in Jerusalem, and he fled to Lachish. But they sent men after him to Lachish, and they killed him there. They brought back his body on horses, and he was buried with his fathers in Jerusalem, in the city of David." End quote. No further details. Another mystery. In the next episode of the History in the Bible, I take a break from the political histories of the two kingdoms to discuss the momentous religious developments set in train by the prophets Amos and Hosea. I'll see you then, and thanks for listening.